I still remember the moment I saw their names light up on the big screen, right after my own slot was crossed out in tiny red letters. I'd been up for weeks preparing slides, scripting jokes, gathering the latest data from my field study on community-driven renewable energy projects. When the conference lineup dropped, I scrolled eagerly, only to find my name shoved to the waiting list page, below the career change panel and two fun movement breaks. Next to me in the cafe, my friend and fellow researcher Priya looked over and said, "They couldn't find a slot for you?" I forced a laugh, waving away her sympathy. Apparently they found room for 8-minute TikTok influencers, but not someone who actually studies how solar microgrids lift villages out of energy poverty. She squeezed my hand. "You'll get in next year." They change the lineup all the time, but next year felt like an eternity. I'd spent a year interviewing families in remote towns, mapping power usage, tracing how local ownership of solar panels cut carbon emissions by 40% in 2 years. I distilled it into 15 rigorous minutes. Anecdote, data, policy recommendations, and I could recite it backwards in my sleep. To be denied a slot felt like being told my work didn't matter. For weeks, I nursed my bruised ego. I watched live streams of the conference on YouTube, pausing them to replay the parts I should have delivered. I crafted emails to the organizers, polite, professional, a final plea for reconsideration. My research on decentralized energy models has direct impact on the policy theme you've chosen this year. I wrote, "I'd be honored to contribute." 3 terse responses arrived. "Thank you for your interest. The program is now finalized." Then came my invitation to serve as a panel moderator on a fringe breakout room. I accepted, folding my ego into a paper crane before clicking confirm. It wasn't speaking out, but it was still a foot in the door, right? I spent the next 2 weeks preparing questions for the panelists, rehearsing my introductions, even practicing how to push the mute button in Zoom. The day before the conference, I laid out my outfit, blazer, slacks, heels. I plugged in my laptop for the final tech check. Everything gleamed with quiet promise. At 9 a.m., I joined the Zoom link for the main stage rehearsal, expecting to see the lineup in a familiar grid, keynote speaker, panel discussions, then my segment as moderator at 2 p.m. Instead, the producers were running through someone else's talk right after the morning keynote, someone named Elena Moretti, whom I'd never heard of. I messaged Priya, "Who is Moretti?" She responded instantly, "She's from that think tank. They do policy briefs for Fortune 500 companies. But I thought your talk was on the same topic." I glanced at the title on the agenda, Community Solar Success Stories, Policy and Practice, the exact title I'd pitched. And there was Moretti's slide deck being shared, maps of villages, graphs of emission reductions, bullet points on community ownership models, my bullet points. I muted the rehearsal. My heart pounded so loud, I thought the producers would hear it. I unmuted. "Excuse me, shouldn't I be presenting this session?" They looked at me blankly. "No, you're moderating in breakout room C at 2 o'clock. Dr. Moretti is presenting the 11 o'clock slot." I swallowed. "But I proposed that content. My research is the foundation of these recommendations." One producer shrugged. "She's filling in. We needed someone with corporate partnerships. She has a bigger profile." My fingers trembled on the keyboard. Bigger profile. Bigger profile. I'd lived with the dusty notebooks of rural interviews, with translators who coaxed English out of buffalo herding farmers. My profile was measured in sweat, not follower counts. I logged off and called Priya. "They're using my research." I choked out. "They cut me and gave it to her." She exhaled slowly. "That is unconscionable." She paused. "Listen, you're still moderating. You can interrupt her. You can correct the record." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it.
Interrupt?
Correct the record. On a split-second decision, that sounded reckless. But as the clock ticked toward the live stream, a fire ignited in my chest. At 10:55 a.m., I clicked into the main stage Zoom room. Moretti's face filled the screen, smiling as she adjusted her microphone. The slide behind her, a photo of a sunbeam striking a dusty rooftop array. It was my photo one I'd taken during a rooftop install in Maharashtra. The file name at the bottom read rural-solar-installation_07.jpg. I'd never used it anywhere public. It was on my hard drive for my own talk. My voice trembled as I unmuted and spoke into the chat. "Excuse me, could you please share the source of that image?" Producers buzzed in the private chat. "Participant is disruptive." Moderator, please mute. Before Priya's calm urging to hold back could register, I pushed through. I turned on my camera and cut through the program director's hurried apologies. I'm Dr. Anika Rao. That slide and the data you're presenting are derivative of my field research. I was denied this speaking slot, and now my work is being used without attribution. Silence fell across several hundred Zoom boxes. One by one, I saw faces flicker. Attendees, panelists, a handful of sponsors. Moretti's eyes widened. I'm sorry. The program director's voice crackled. Dr. Rao, please allow Dr. Moretti to proceed. We can discuss attribution later. I shook my head, gripping the desk. No, if we're discussing policy, we need transparency on sources. Community-driven research cannot be co-opted without credit. A sponsor logo popped up in the corner, then vanished as the producer hastily ended the stream with a quick notice. We're experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by. There I sat, camera on, mic twitching red, while hundreds of attendees stared at the frozen notice. Moments later, the director sent me a private chat. Please mute, then leave the room. I felt the weight of all the unanswered emails, the crossed-off calendars, the weeks of preparation vanish in that instant. I reached for the leave meeting button, thumb hovering, then paused. I had a choice: bow out gracefully, or seize the moment. I typed into the chat, attendees, thank you for your patience. If you care about ethical scholarship, join me in Breakout Room C at 2 p.m. for a deep dive into community solar models. I'll be sharing every source, every interview, every dataset. Then I hit leave meeting. For the next 2 hours, my phone rang incessantly with private chat invites and WhatsApp messages. Colleagues offered Zoom links of their own. Sponsors asked for clarification. Journalists pinged to schedule interviews. In between, I scrambled to set up my own breakout room, a fresh Zoom link, a pristine slide deck with full citations, an outline that expanded beyond my original talk. Priya dropped in to help me calibrate the audio while I imported my maps and charts. At 1:45, I opened the room and posted the link in the main conference chat. My heart galloped as attendees trickled in 20, then 50, then over 100. The breakout room bubbled with energy. At 2 o'clock precisely, I started. Welcome, I'm Dr. Anika Rao, the researcher behind the community solar data you just saw. Today you'll hear directly from the villages I visited, recorded interviews, first-hand accounts, and uncut data visualizations. I introduced a short clips playlist, elders describing the first hum of electricity in their homes, school children reading by solar-powered lights, panchayat members plotting governance models. Each clip cracked the polished veneer of corporate case studies. Then I switched to live Q&A, hundreds of questions flooding in about policy adoption, funding mechanisms, scalability challenges. 2 hours later, I glanced at the participant count, 287, the largest session across every track by far. I logged the final poll. 93% said they preferred my session over the original slot. Comments scrolled. Best session of the conference. Can you share the full dataset? Please deliver at next year's keynote. I exhaled, relief and triumph warbling in my chest. They denied me the stage, but they couldn't deny the power of my voice when I took it back. I closed the meeting and sat in the dark computer glow. My mind buzzed with possibilities. Invitations to speak, offers to co-author white papers, requests from NGOs. The co-opted stage had become my catalyst. I plugged in my phone to charge and sent a brief message to the program director. Thank you for the unplanned speaking opportunity. I will expect my original slot and credit on next year's agenda. Congratulations on elevating community-led research. Moments later, the typing notification appeared below my message, and I braced for the reply. When the program director's reply finally pinged into my inbox, I held my breath before opening it. Dr. Rao, your breakout surpassed expectations. We'd like to offer you the official 11 o'clock a.m. slot at next year's conference, and would be honored if you co-chair the policy track. My apologies for the oversight. I read it twice, then a third time, as though the words might reshape themselves into something less remarkable. Then I stared at the ceiling, feeling the ache of sleepless preparation melt into a slow swell of triumph. Co-chair the policy track. Next year's 11 a.m. slot. All those crossed-out days and unanswered emails dissolved into one clear signpost. They'd seen what happens when you deny the researcher her voice. You create a vacuum so compelling, people will pull you back in. But the story didn't end there. Within 24 hours, my phone was ringing off the hook. Editors at academic journals wanted to fast-track my community solar findings. Tech magazines requested interviews on how to ethically source grassroots data, and even the local NPR affiliate invited me to their morning show to talk about the ethics of academic gatekeeping. Each request felt like another crack widening in the glass ceiling I'd hit for years. I scheduled a call with Moretti, partly because I wanted to hear her version of events, partly because I needed to vent. Over Zoom, her face flickered against a background of polished bookshelves. She wore a carefully neutral expression. "Anika," she began, voice smooth as varnish. "First, congratulations on the breakout. I've been following the chatter." My shoulders tensed. "Thank you. I'd like to understand, how did your team end up using my data without attribution?" There was a beat of silence. She closed her eyes, exhaling. "I wasn't involved in the programming choices. My team compiled multiple studies on decentralized energy. They said your work was public domain once it was archived. No citation needed for conference presentations." I blinked. Public domain doesn't mean free to present as original. Even Wikipedia insists on attribution. Her lips tightened. "Policy briefs are a different beast. We were under a tight deadline, and the producers wanted recognized names." I let out a slow breath. I was the recognized name in that field. My name was on the original proposal. "But you're forgiven. So long as you join me as co-panelist at next year's track and acknowledge your oversight publicly." She nodded, eyes downcast. "Agreed." I closed my laptop afterward, feeling that same blend of relief and vindication I'd tasted in the breakout. It wasn't about public shaming. It was about setting a precedent that academic ownership mattered, that community research wasn't collateral you could repurpose without credit. Over the following weeks, I continued my work at a breakneck pace. I collaborated with Priya to launch an open access portal for our community solar datasets, complete with raw interviews, geospatial mappings, and translated transcripts. We invited the conference's tech sponsors to host the portal, guaranteeing server capacity and visibility. Within days, energy NGOs, municipal planners, and university students were downloading the files, poring over them, and citing them in their own work, with clear attribution back to me and my team. All the while, I balanced invitations to speak at other venues, city council meetings, entrepreneurial summits, secondary school career days. Every time I shared those rural voices, I felt a surge of purpose. Research could change policy when it wasn't hidden behind paywalls or buried in obscure journals. Then, 6 months later, the conference occurred again, only this time, with my name shining at 11 a.m. on the central stage right after the keynote. Daniel flew in to surprise me, and he sat in the front row, phone off, eyes bright. Priya elbowed me as we sat backstage. "You ready?" she whispered. I nodded, hands still but heart racing. I stepped onto the stage to applause that swelled like a welcome tide. The producer introduced me. Following our keynote on global energy trends, we welcomed Dr. Anika Rao, whose community-driven research reshaped how we think about solar microgrids. Cheers followed. Then I launched into my talk, precise, impassioned, anchored in data and human stories. When I played a montage of villagers describing the first flicker of electric light at sundown, you could have heard a pin drop. Afterward, during the lightning kinda, a program sponsor from a major utility company raised his hand. "Dr. Rao, what would you say is the single biggest barrier to scaling community solar in urban centers?" I smiled. City councils often lack the frameworks to include citizen co-ownership. We need policy incentives, tax credits for community cooperatives, streamlined permits for rooftop installations, mandatory inclusion of low-income neighborhoods. I laid out 3 simple legislative changes, and the murmur of conversation that followed felt like a groundswell of momentum. When I stepped off the stage, the program director greeted me with a hug. "You were incredible. Thank you for steering this track." He handed me a framed print of my keynote slide, his gift to speakers. And in the corner was a small plaque. Presented with thanks to Dr. Anika Rao. I caught Daniel's eye from across the room. He mouthed, proud. That night, at the gala dinner, Moretti found me in the crowd. She was flanked by her team. "Dr. Rao." I wanted to say again, "Thank you. You changed the conversation." I nodded. "Thank you for acknowledging it." She held out her hand. "Can we collaborate on a policy white paper? Combine your qualitative insights with our corporate models?" I smiled. "I'd like that. Let's make sure we credit every source." She grinned. "Of course." At the end of the evening, I stood on the balcony overlooking the city skyline, lights flickering like microgrids across rooftops. Daniel wrapped his arm around me. "Look at that," he said softly. "All those lights, your research is behind every one of them." I leaned into him, the night air cool on my skin. "It's not just mine. It belongs to everyone who shared their stories, who opened their homes for interviews, who believed in the work." He kissed my temple. "And they'll keep believing because you made space for them." I closed my eyes, breathing deep. The journey from being denied that first slot to reclaiming the stage had taught me something crucial. Authority doesn't reside in titles, but in the courage to speak truth when the world says your voice doesn't matter. In the months that followed, I launched a mentorship program for early career researchers, equipping them with tools to safeguard their intellectual property and advocate for visibility at conferences. I served on editorial boards to reform citation standards for public presentations. Each effort felt like adding another solar panel to the grid I'd ignited, tiny contributions that collectively could power change. And whenever I see the list of speakers for the next year's conference, I smile to find not only my name at 11 a.m. on the central stage, but 15 names of researchers I've mentored, each one a reminder that denial is not the end, and that our collective voices can light up even the most resistant halls. Because they denied me a speaking slot once. But what they unleashed was a spark that could never be dimmed. And as long as that spark burns, there will always be room on the stage for truth.